Today's presentation will be Eclipse and AP automation with Dynamics GP. While we do integrate with many other ERP applications, we'll be focusing on Dynamics GP today. Okay, so today what we're going to be doing is going over a few different product sets that we have that kind of combine to create an end-to-end product solution. So the typical problem that we're trying to solve is the ability to take all of these unstructured AP invoices, take all those invoices, extract the relevant data, things like vendor name, invoice number, as well as line item information, be able to also separate these documents intelligently, put it through a workflow routing type solution, so things like matching documents, validation to make sure that we're pulling valid information, and then routing that document for approval, depending on the type of document, and then ultimately pushing that data into GP. This is kind of the overview of what I'm going to show, and while I'm going to be using an import function rather than a physical scanner in this case, you can use any type of capture device. So we can monitor emails, you can do it from Office, we can monitor faxes, scanners. We're going to be using this intelligent capture front end. It's the first thing we're going to show. We're going to then do the PO and receiver match. So these particular documents that I'm going to be bringing in are primarily focused on inventory-based items. Certainly we support non-POs and PO-based invoices as well. They just a little different process here. And we're going to route it for approval. In our particular case, today we're going to be routing based on a defined drop-down list. So basically a number of a user or an AP processor will select the user that needs to approve it. However, in a typical implementation, we can also route that document based on a number of hierarchies. One either based on cost center or dollar amount or both. It can also be based on vendor name, etc. So we're going to show how we can automate that with our, well, there's basically two main components here, advanced capture solution. So this is going to be the tool that where you capture either from an email or scanned document. It's going to read all the data automatically. You don't have to train specific vendors. It uses a knowledge base of terms to be able to extract that information. Eclipse is the core solution, and that's basically not only going to do the storage of that document, but it's also going to allow you to do all the matching and routing and validation within that particular process. The data that gets pushed into GP in this particular case will be done through a eConnect interface, which is a native GP integration tool. And then the ability to embed buttons within the GP interface. So literally on the interface in GP, you're going to see a Docstar button. And we can make it in kind of any word you want. Ours says Docstar retrieve, but again, we can make that button say whatever you'd like. So that's our application integrator. And then lastly, it can actually be step 1 here or step 6, but ultimately when the check gets cut, we get an electronic version. So you print to your physical printer like you normally do, but when you print it, we also intercept the print stream. So we get the check image now into the system. So the first step is, essentially once you've put the PO into the system, you now get the AP invoice. And so again, we can monitor a number of different ways to grab these AP invoices, either through email scan, MFP, or fax. You can also take pictures on your phone. We have all sorts of support for that. In many cases, certainly if you're opening the mail, you're going to get lots and lots of invoices. And the system can actually separate. So you just literally, you take all the invoices for the day, you remove your staples, you stack them all together, you put it in the scanner. The system will separate each document. If it's a 3-page document, it will know that, and it knows that in a number of different ways. There's sometimes page 1 of. You also notice that typically total will follow, and then we can also look for change in invoice number. So the separation happens automatically. It then classifies, so in some cases you might have inventory-based invoices or non-inventory-based invoices. You might have sales orders in that particular batch, and it can classify, and it can say, hey, this is a invoice or a purchase order, sales order. And the system can actually delineate that through a number of different ways using synonyms that it might find on a document. Very much like I just said, artificial intelligence, it can look at a specific number of keywords and decide what it is. Okay. Then we have the data extraction. So you have the header and then the line item information. You'll see here header information such as invoice number, invoice date, etc. Footer information such as subtotal, total. And as you'll notice here, the company name, company ID, and company address are kind of grayed out a bit. So we use actually a phone number. So we look at the phone number, we do a vendor master lookup to GP and pull the company ID or the vendor ID, and that will pull all the other information. Then we have the GL coding and AP line item information. So regardless of how many pages there are, regardless of how many line items on a specific invoice, it can extract that information with pretty high confidence. And it uses that through spatial relationships. So it looks for the word quantity or QTY, it looks for description, and then it matches those particular documents. Okay. And then finally, the rules-based validation. So this is where we're going to come in and we're going to look and we're going to do vendor lookups. We're going to do mathematical reconciliation. So we look at the total costs of the invoice, that's subtotal of the total. We look at freight, we look at tax, we look at discounts, and then we mathematically add everything together. So we make sure the quantity times price equals total amount. We enumerate all the totals to make sure that that equals the subtotal. Okay, and then this ends up sending into the Eclipse interface. So the Eclipse is the document management system. This is what's going to hold all the documents. This is what's going to route it. So you see here in the screenshot, there's going to be a workflow button, and all of your AP invoices either assigned to you. We can load balance. So if you have multiple AP clerks, we can load balance it, or we can just throw it in one queue for you. The documents you'll be able to search by any of the extracted data. So, a year from now, you want to go and find something, you can very easily through this interface. And also for records retention. So 7 years in a day, we can remove these particular documents, purge them, or move them to a longer term storage solution based on your particular retention scheduling. All right, then we initiate a document workflow. So essentially, once these invoices are in, we do the three-way match. We make sure that the invoice matches the purchase order in the receiver match, and basically route it for approval. Certainly in inventory-based systems, if they do match, then just push the data. In non-PO based type situations, we'll route the invoice for approval, and somebody would have to sign off on that. Again, vendor approvals can be based on a number of different things: vendor name, cost center amount, any type of validation we can approval base we can do. We're also going to be pulling the vendor ID, the payment terms, the address ID, all the GL codes right into the Eclipse interface. So if you need to go in and change something, it's going to pull all the valid information through the eConnect interface. So you add a new GL code in GP, that shows up immediately in our system. Ultimately, at the end, when we need to push the information, we do look at all the purchases, the tax, the freight, the discounts, all of that, and then we figure out and automatically apply a pay line. So obviously when we push the data, we need a debit credit scenario, so we will automatically create that pay line. And then we're going to apply an electronic signature, which is e-sign compliant. Not only will there be an audit trail of all this information for auditing purposes, but we'll also have a digital stamp signature. So then the data gets pushed. We can auto voucher a batch. Or if we apply a posting date, we can post that particular invoice. The distribution data, all the line items, and the pay line get added to the distribution side, and we'll populate the purchases, discount, freight, miscellaneous tax appropriately based on the particular invoice. Lastly is the ability to be able to retrieve those particular documents. So we'll show here right within the interface, we'll have a Docstar button, retrieve, we can call it whatever you want, as I said, and that's built into the interface. It's going to open a browser with all the related documents. And the nice part about that is you don't stick documents within GP. They're outside in a central content repository with the right level of security and auditing. But at the same point in time, you don't have to go to each account record or each transaction and attach a document. That can be very cumbersome. And the last piece is the RPM. So you'll see this as we post our batch and we go in and then go to our edit check batch. We're going to go and select some documents, and then we're going to print. But instead of printing to your default physical printer, we're going to select the RPM print driver. And what happens here is it takes and overlays all the data that gets generated at GP onto a physical PDF, essentially check representation. So you could still physically print as you do today, but it creates a PDF of that check run, and that gets added to the Eclipse system. Okay, so I'm going to get to a live demonstration now. So I'm going to I'm running this actually on a virtual machine. Okay, so the first part to this scenario is I'm going to kind of demonstrate the ability to take in these unstructured AP invoice documents. So here's a couple examples of 3D Pipe Corporation. You have different types of invoice layout. So you have PO number over here. You have the invoice number up in the top right. We go to a different one, this AT Sports invoice. As you see here, it's much different looking. So you got invoice number over here, and then you have order number, and then you have customer order number. So as we go through this process, you're going to notice there's a lot of similar words: order number, customer order number. So the system is going to be smart enough to delineate the difference, and it will auto-learn based on the type of invoice. So when we get to that process, I'm going to show you that. So I'm just going to take, I'll take these three invoices here, and I'm going to emulate scanning from a copier for today, and I'm going to paste them in this hot folder directory. And basically, the system monitors, picks them up as you see here, and starts to process these particular documents. Okay. Now I have this little thing at the top here, my single sign-on utility, and I already have the validation station open. So I'm just going to open the validation station, and I'm going to click Get Next Batch. So this is going to go and just grab those three documents that we just processed, and it's done all the recognition, and it's going to bring back and separate each document into its own document set, and you'll see that it will bring and show all the data that it's extracted. So it starts at the first page here. Again, this is run on a virtual machine, so it's a little slow, so bear with me. The first thing that happens is it looks for the phone number. In many cases, vendor information is really, it could be a logo. In this case, you see 3D Pipe Corporation. It's nice and easy, but there really is no identifier. There's nothing that says vendor name equals 3D Pipe. So what we do is we look for the phone number, and we can do that through a regular expression search. And in this particular case, we did that, and it went out and populated all this other information you see here from the GP vendor master table. You're going to notice when I click in each area, how in purple on the right where it extracts that information from. So header, footer information, you'll see here. You'll notice things like total, subtotal. That's typically easy, but when you get into situations where it might be a total, balance due, balance, the system might extract a certain value, and you can come in and simply click on the field where it might have not got that right value. I have some examples of that moving through here. You also notice the line item detail, how it extracted that, and all the detail that you find here. Now in this particular case, it's saying the validation area, it's saying I need to GL code, so I'm going to come here and apply my GL code. I'm going to make this a service-based GL code, and now that validation step goes away. Typically, you're not going to click through each and every single one, so as a result, I'm just going to click this verify batch, this little eyeball here, and it's first going to do is look for low confidence values. Okay, So it's automatically skipped the first one. You notice how there's a green check mark up there. Moves to the second page and it's saying, hey, I'm not sure that I read this right. So it gives you a kind of a code snippet of where it read. So it read a 6, but you notice how it's red. So if this was not correct, I would hit, I'd hit the delete button and type in the right one. But it is correct, so I hit confirm and it'll move to the next low confidence value. In this case, it was a period. Okay, and then it'll move to the next document, so you can see. So it's a very kind of seamless approach. Now you'll notice here how it got the edge of the line of the box as a value. So what we're going to do is simply put our cursor in here and then hit the delete key, and this will delete that I because that's not a valid character for us in here. So we've gotten rid of that and confirm. Then move on to the next low confidence box, and we're done. All right, so now that we've done that, we need to come in here, and you'll notice that this is all blank, and we have a number of different errors down here. So it fully integrates and pulls back all of your data from GP. So in this case, it pulls your vendor list, and it's showing that you have 2 vendor IDs for this particular customer or this vendor. So once I select that and I hit select, you'll see all of those different things go away. Okay. You'll also see that I need to GL code that, so I'm also going to come up here and apply the appropriate code. All right, and we'll go back to this particular one here, and there's all sorts of errors on this one. Okay, so there's a few things. It's saying that some arithmetic rule error, so it's saying that if you add all these things up, that doesn't equal the total of all the table items. So I see an issue here, and there really isn't a freight charge, but I think what it did was it pulled the weight as a freight. So this is a good example of how it will learn. So I put 0 in here, and this will essentially, the next time it goes to extract this information, it's not going to make that mistake again. It's not going to pull the weight into the freight cost. And when I click in another field, you'll see that that particular field goes away, or that particular error goes away. The next thing you'll notice is that it can't do any of the matching, and the reason is because I don't have a valid part number. So we're going to use this click to capture function. So you literally just click in each one and it will automatically populate the right rows, and you'll notice how all of that information goes away. Now if I was to come in here and just make the 4 and 8 in the PO number, you're going to notice that all of that goes away as well, because it's having a problem saying, hey, this PO number and this item code don't exist. They don't tie together. So all that validation is done automatically for you as part of this particular process. Again, I'll have to come in here and apply the GL code appropriately. This save in the service, and then when I'm done, I simply hit this send batch button. And what this will do is push all this data and the physical documents into the Eclipse repository. Okay, so this is basically the second step of the process. So this is Eclipse here. You notice when I open Eclipse, you have a workflow alert button at the bottom. It's saying that 3 items are awaiting approval. So we'll go up to our workflow tab at the top here, and you'll see the 3 documents that we just processed. Okay. So this is where we're actually going to do the routing and the actual pushing of the data into the repository and into GP. So I'm just going to take one at a time here. I'm going to open it up. You just double click from my workflow queue, and this is going to open up our 3D pipe example. Okay. So the first thing it's prompting me for, again, is an approval. Now in my case, just for simplicity purposes, I'm physically, as an AP clerk, selecting an approver. We can automatically do this. Now you'll also notice down here, if I click in the vendor ID area, there's a drop-down list. This is a real-time bound GP vendor list. So when I click on this, what it does is it actually loads the vendor ID along with the vendor name information so that it's all tied together. Okay. So that's the same case here too when we work with address ID, the document types, all of these different things are fully integrated. So we'll bring back all that information automatically. So when I hit the submit button, you're going to notice that it's going to assign it to this Brent Wessler. So when I hit submit here, it's going to go away. And I'm now going to go into my workflow queue. You notice here we have a workflow queue of a number of items, but when I go into Brent Wessler's queue, you're going to see that one 3D pipe. So I'm now Brent in the system. I'm the approver. Okay, so you'll see in that particular queue. So Brent only sees items that are specific to him, and you can lock that down however you'd like. And when I open that up now, you're going to see a few things. You have the approve and deny button. If we go down, we look at the line items here. You'll see all the line item detail. We don't have the pay line in yet. That's going to be added after. Okay, and we're going to also, you can come in here and modify this information. Again, things like the distribution types. You know, is it a pay? Is it a purchase? Is it freight? Or is it a write-off? What is it? And all these are bound to the GP system. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to simply click this little button here that allows me to apply a stamp signature. And I'm going to hit the, click on this image, apply that particular stamp signature. You can also utilize our chat window here to correspond with your AP clerks. So, okay to pay. And when I do that, it then logs that information into my history here. So I do have my chat history, okay to pay. Okay, so it does automatically put that information in. All right, so once I'm done, I'm going to hit the approve button. And what's going to happen here is once I hit approve, it's going to take this information and automatically push it into the GP system. Now, document is now in the system. So let's just open that up again just so we can see what happened there. You're going to notice there's two new buttons. The GP upload exception button, if there was an exception, this would be blue. And you could fix whatever the problem was and then click this button and it would re-upload that particular document. In this case, I'm going to hit complete, which is going to remove it from my queue. I'm going to now open up GP and I'm going to go into my purchasing module here. I'm going to go to my batches. You're going to notice an Eclipse batch. So we automatically create an Eclipse batch, as you can see here. But I can also go into my purchasing transactions here. So there's another way. There's several ways to get to the transaction. So select the transaction entry. And I'm going to go up and select that particular record, which is here, 3D pipe. Select, and it loads all that information along with all the distribution information. Gets added as well. Okay. Now again, you'll have this little retrieve button. When I click the retrieve, this will then launch the browser and show you specific documents. Okay. So in this case, it's going to launch that particular invoice. So it brings back that particular invoice, as you can see here. Okay. Now, when I do that and I launch that same thing, you'll notice when I open up that particular invoice, in this case, the 3D pipe, I also have the related documents function. So this is, we'll come back to this, but this does allow us to see the purchase order associated with this particular system. So this invoice and purchase order, all the related documents are in one location. So I can see that here. Okay. We can obviously do that for each one in our workflow queue. But once that particular document has been processed, we're going to come in here and we're going to, so I'll just save that. And we're going to post the batch. So I'm going to go into my batches and I'm going to post this particular batch. Okay, so once I've done that, then I can go in and cut my check. So I'm going to do that. All of this, all these different summary reports can also be captured automatically through the RPM print driver. Essentially, it just takes a copy of that. So if we refresh this, okay, it's complete 100%. So good. I'm going to refresh that, and that batch should. There it goes. Okay. My demo there isn't. All right. So we're all done with that, and we're going to now go to the checks. and we'll show you how the check gets pushed in through the system as well. So we're going to go to our purchasing. We're going to go over to our edit batch, check batch. Okay. I'm going to select the batch. Okay. Go. And here's our 3D pipe. Okay. And then we're going to hit print checks. Okay. So what we do here is when we print this, you're going to notice we're going to select the printer. And our default printer is the RPM driver. Okay. So we're going to print all this in. Okay. And it should be done shortly. Those are all printed in. And then essentially then those items will go to the general ledger after that. Okay, so once we're done with that, we're going to go back and we're going to take a look at the check. So we can look for by PO number, we can look by check number. So if I know the check number is A11111, use that. It will then find all matching documents, in this case, the check that gets printed. But from the check, you can also reference the invoice and the purchase order. Everything is in one spot. You can also just search by the particular purchase order, 1315, if it is PO based, and it will return all those particular documents. In this particular case, the PO, the check, and the invoice all in one location.